Good evening and welcome to the Hearthstone Half Hour, episode 6. My name's Hammy, and in our latest video we're going to be jumping into a little bit of the world of priest decks from a new to intermediate player's perspective, a bit about how they can work, how you can tweak them, the kind of cards that go into them, and then we'll jump into a couple of play mode games on the ladder just to show you how they work in a constructed format. So this is actually going to be the first of our videos where we're actually showing you a bit of us on the ladder itself. Previously we've been doing intro videos, taking you through tutorial offline games, and we've done a little bit of an intro to the arena as well. We played a mage deck, we showed you a bit of deck building on a paladin deck, and then started off a bit of a paladin arena on. So we're going into the world of constructed decks now, a little bit different to the arena. Obviously you are entering a world where you can ladder up, you can play better opponents as you go along. They might have a different mix of cards, strategy compared to a draft, a lot different. So first things first, let's jump straight in, and if you played the tutorials and meddled around with a few games in practice mode, you'll have had a look at the mage deck. Maybe you tried a priest, maybe you haven't. I quite like priest. It's quite a strong archetype or deck type for a couple of reasons. So what we'll do in this sort of introduction to a basic, I'm not going to say it's the best priest deck in the world, but it's a pretty basic priest deck given the cards that I have, is go through what a priest as a hero has in his or her armoury, kind of class specific cards they can use, the strategies that they can use specifically, and take a look at my priest deck in particular, what it's got in, how I try to use it, and then when we've got to that stage we will jump right into a quick ladder game and show you how it works in action. So first things first, we'll have a look through the kind of priest cards and the class specific things that they can use. So if you've played World of Warcraft, and I will say this a couple of times, a lot of this will be very familiar. All of these are named after spells in the game that the priest can use. If you haven't, don't worry, it's still pretty simple to have a look at. So priests, a lot of games, a lot of archetypes, whether it's, old role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons, anything offline or online. Priests heal, one of the ever constants of the role-playing universe. So naturally a priest in Warcraft and in Hearthstone is not too much different. You've got the healing element as well, so as you can see, things like Circle of Healing, various other bits, shields that you can drop on people, buffs, so buffing, healing, that's one play style of a priest that you can play. And then in Warcraft, but also there's sort of a shadow priest. So a priest in the World of Warcraft game can go between sort of effectively holy form or shadow form, and in shadow form they become a caster, more of a mage, and you can see things here like Mind Blast, things that look sort of a lot more purple, dark in nature. Shadow form there, Shadow Word Death, and these sort of more damaging, destructive spells are a chunky part of the priest arsenal as well. So you've effectively got a couple of play styles there. What makes priests good? Well, priests have a couple of excellent things in their armoury. The first of them, by no means the best, but certainly one of them, is Northshire Cleric. So if you have a look at this card, whenever a minion is healed, draw a card, 1 mana, and there's, I think, 1 attack hidden under there. There we go. 1 attack and 3 health. And they also sell cookies, according to the flavour text there. So this is a strong card, and the reason it's strong is because of draw power. Now note that it says whenever a minion is healed. That's not just your minion, that's any minion. So if you're in a mirror match against a priest or someone who's healing their minions, if your opponent heals one of their minions, you get to draw a card. If you heal your own minions, you get to draw a card too. And if you heal off multiple minions in one go, then guess what? You get to draw as many cards as the amount of minions that you've healed. So for that reason, this gives draw power. What are its downsides? Well, as you can see, it's got low health, it's got low attack, and it's got 3 health, so it can survive a reasonable amount of time early game. But people know this card. If you're playing in a constructed, you've made your own deck environment, if you're playing in play mode, if you're laddering, if you're a priest and you drop one of these, your opponent's eyes will immediately swing onto it and think, right, if I leave that there, that's going to be trouble. How do you play this card? Well, you can drop it early game. There are some other nifty little tools in the priest armory that you can use to keep it alive. We'll have a look at those in a sec. A good way to play it is, even though it's only 1 mana, and you might think, oh, should I play that turn 1 if I get it in my hand? Really where it comes is when you've got a few good minions, you've got board control, and you can drop it down, and it's not likely to get killed in one go. You want to drop it down in a situation where you can actually start healing minions and really getting the full effects, the full benefits of that draw power. So if I drop this turn 1 for 1 mana, and I have to heal it turn 2 for 2 mana, and I heal something again turn 3, and I've used 2 mana and I only have 1 mana, probably by that stage I might be struggling with a priest deck. So it can be an early game drop. You can use other combo cards to maybe get it attacking early and things like that, but by no means am I an expert player, but this generally does well behind a taunt, behind a tanky card, behind something that forces your opponent's attentions onto something else, which means that it stays alive for a little bit longer. You need a way generally of keeping this card alive, because if you drop it, your opponent will look at it and they'll see it as being dangerous. In terms of synergy and combos, while we're on this page, you can see Divine Spirit there, and if I just jump 1 page, I will show you. Oh, where's it gone? Am I being blind? Nope, I've gone back 2 pages. So the next combo is Inner Fire, you can see there, and Divine Spirit. So, Divine Spirit. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. What did I do there? I just add another card? I'm just breaking my deck. Let's get those back in. And did I broke my deck. Excellent. What's the card that I removed from my deck? Maybe it was Holy Smite. Okay, yeah, it probably was. I'm going to have to look back through the stream now. There's a tip for you. Don't randomly click around. So, Divine Spirit, before we were interrupted. Double a minion's health. 2 mana. Just a really, really solid card. The mana cost is good. Now, what options do you have here? Well, if you've got something, we'll get to these cards in my deck later, but if you've got something high health, high health, high damage, imagine a Ragnaros, for example, with 16 health, immediately tougher for your opponents to take down. A Lord of the Arena, a tank card with 10 health. It stacks on top of other buffs, so if you've already got a minion buffed up with more health, then it will just double the existing amount of health on it. So, a really solid card. However, if you then combine that with this card, Inner Fire, so for 1 mana, change your minion's attack to be equal to its health, then I probably don't need to spell it out. If I've doubled something's health, and they've got a huge health, and then I give them equal attack, suddenly we've got a very scary card. And look at the combined cost. The combined cost of those two is 3 mana for a Divine Spirit, and then for an Inner Fire. So if you have 2 of those in your hand, late game, you can suddenly make something very painful. Also in the early game, perhaps if you're struggling, then you can buff up pretty much any low game card, low early game card, to have chunky health and then chunky attack, and you can maybe use that as a pinch to keep you in the game as well. So yeah, your Divine Spirit and Inner Fire combo. Quite a few priest decks pack 2 of those each, just because they're utility, and if you've got the minions to make the most of them, they just generally help you out in a lot of tight spots. Power Word Shield. Not in every priest deck. I've tried intentionally not to look through too many decks, but of course I've seen a few. I took a look at BlizzCon, so what people were playing. Buffing a minion for 2 health and drawing a card for 1 mana. What's not to like? It keeps something in the game a bit longer. It combos with that Inner Fire and Divine Spirit combo that we saw earlier. You get to draw a card. So pretty solid. Doesn't fall into every priest deck, but in terms of looking at ones to play when you first start playing priest, dual benefits, health, draw, low mana, everyone's a winner. Holy Smite, again, doesn't drop into every priest deck. In this one at the moment, I don't have a selection of all the cards in the world right now. I've not been able to craft everything I've wanted, but 2 damage for 1 mana. It's a cheap card that will let you trade away some early game minions. It might let you reach out and perhaps drop another few things as well. What else do we have here? Here are 2 staple cards, staple cards of the priest arsenal: Shadow Word Pain and Shadow Word Death. Why are these staple? Why is priest a very strong deck? These 2 cards are certainly part of it. So for 2 mana, Shadow Word Pain lets you destroy a minion with 3 or less attack. Now when you look at a lot of the early to mid game minions, and even some of the sort of the 3 or 4, the Gurubashi Berserker, for example, is an example. A lot of minions, even if they're strong and tanky, you'll have a look at the Senjin Shieldmaster as well. He's only got 3 attack as well. So a lot of popular cards have got 3 or less attack in the early game, some of them in the mid game, particularly with sort of early to new player decks as well. So the reason this is so effective is that the mana cost is cheap. and it will let you actually, because of that 3 or less attack, it will let you pick off some quite expensive minions. So if you have a look at the Senjin Shieldmaster, he costs 4 mana. For 2 mana I can get rid of someone's minion that's cost 4, and those kind of trades, you're not only keeping the board clear when you sort of try and trade minion for minion, but you're also looking for advantageous trades. So if it costs me 2 mana to destroy a minion with 3 or less attack, and I get rid of a Senjin Shieldmaster that costs my opponent 4 mana, I'm not spending as much mana as he is. I can play more cards for that mana, and at the same time I can remove cards that give him other advantages. So removing the Senjin Shieldmaster, if I was to face it in an opponent's deck, would mean that I could get rid of a taunting minion. Maybe that then allows me to attack his hero, pick off other more vulnerable cards, other more powerful cards that he's hiding behind this taunting card. Gives you good options. So Shadow Word Pain, 2 mana, very mana effective, and a lot of things at the moment come into that 3 or less attack. Early game you can trade. Shadow Word Death, step 2. Very similar thing. 3 mana, I can destroy a minion with an attack of 5 or more. Now again, when you're getting into the late game, whether they're buffed, whether they're just out of the box that strong, an attack of 5 or more is quite common in some areas in the late game. So in the mid to late game, depending on what deck you're playing against, Shadow Word Death, again for 3 mana, will really let you trade very, very effectively, and it can just plain out save your life on a lot of occasions. Is it a Ragnaros 8/8? All of those powerful end game legendary or epic cards, no problem. 3 mana, I've got rid of something that cost him 8 mana to play, and not only have I got a mana advantage in that trade, I've got a very, very, very nasty card off the table as well. Lord of the Arena, you know, that's a random example, 6 attack on that, no problem at all. So Shadow Word Pain and Shadow Word Death, very mana effective. Generally you see 2 of these regardless in most priest decks, just absolutely regardless. They're massive staples of this deck type. In fact, I can see that I don't have 2 Shadow Word Pain, so I've made some kind of mistake in putting my deck back together there. I'm going to get rid of a Holy Smite and hope that I'm not down shooting my deck, because Shadow Word Pain, 2 of that should definitely be in every deck. We can see what I removed by accident. Other priest-specific weapons we've got in our armoury. You do see some people playing Thought Steal. For 3 mana I get effectively 2 of my opponent's cards, but really it kind of all depends. It's sort of a tech example. Sort of a bit of a throw of the dice, that one, but you do see it come up in the odd deck or 2. Light Spawn, attack equal to health, so if it's damaged then its attack goes down, but it starts 5/5. See that come up occasionally. Holy Nova, not competitively, or I've not seen masses of it competitively, but beg pardon, the 2 damage to all enemies, and the heal is also quite handy. I have one in as a bit of a deck clearer. Sometimes it saved my life, sometimes it's never showed up when I needed it, so one of my decisions was potentially adding another Holy Nova into this deck. Mind Control, another very chunky, very useful priest card. Nominated a spell most likely to make your opponent punch the wall, and not a truer word was spoken. So 8 mana, very, very expensive, but Mind Control is coming out in the late game for that cost. Taking control of an enemy minion for 8 mana. Think of, with your Shadow Word Death, you could be taking over a very powerful minion. With your Mind Control, are you taking a Ragnaros? Are you taking a Ysera? We'll have a look at Ysera at another point if you've not seen her already. But you're robbing, it gives you the potential to rob whatever your opponent is hurting with you most, or whatever you need from your opponent maybe most. It can be used to swing the course of a fight, it can be used to reinforce your victory, it also can be used to save your life. So those are some, not all, but there's some of the priest sort of unique cards and what they can be used to do. If I jump into crafting mode, we can have a look at a few more that you can see I've not actually got yet. So Holy Fire, that does come up in some decks. Deal 5, restore 5. 6 mana, quite expensive, but there are a few decks that have that kind of trade in as well. It gives the heal, it will let you pick something expensive off. Mind Games. It's an interesting one. It's got potential. I've seen it pop up occasionally, but the healing element, the 5 health, keep it on the table. It's a bit of a WoW joke there. No one ever clicks a priest light well in WoW. But again, it's another card that's best hidden behind a tank. And another card that you see come up occasionally is Prophet Velen. Again, a priest-specific legendary. Double the damage and healing of your spells and your hero power. Suddenly that makes your heals very effective, your saps very effective as well. So, yep, finds his way into some priest decks as well. So, in terms of having a look at my deck, what have I put together here and in what way have I done it? So most of these are sort of common cards. There's the odd sort of rare and things in there, and Ragnaros is obviously my legendary. But let's have a quick run through this deck and see what the rough sort of goal of it is. So we are a priest. I've accidentally, very usefully, got rid of the name. Priest constructed. And let's see what we have here. So as you can see of the mana curve of this deck, I've got a lot of cheap stuff early game, perhaps a little bit too much. You can see almost I'm a bit thin there in the late game when it comes to heavy hitting cards, less than the 6 and 7 mana mark, sort of late game finishes. So this deck at the moment relies quite heavily on Ragnaros as the late game sort of finisher. He does some very tasty stuff which we can look at in a bit. But you can see, we've discussed at the moment, that one Holy Smite, I've enjoyed it in the past because it just lets me pick off the odd minion early game. I'm not entirely sure how effective it will be with one. I'm being honest with you, I'm going to have to go back and look at the stream afterwards and see what I remove from my deck. So we're now looking at a slightly, probably different deck, and sorry, don't remember correctly to what I had when I started. So Holy Smite, a cheap mana pincher, maybe I could swap that for Holy Nova. Inner Fire, we've already discuss the combo of Inner Fire and Divine Spirit. Double a minion's health, change the minion's attack to be equal to its health. So getting those two off with on a minion gives me a powerful combo at pretty much any stage of the game that I've got the mana to use it, or the right cards on the table. I've even found myself in some desperate games dropping those two on a Northshire Cleric and suddenly creating a 1/3 into a 6 health, 6 attack. Whenever a minion is healed, draw a card. You can scare an opponent with that, and particularly if you go second and use the coin to get that extra mana on top as well. So some options with those two. Power Word Shield, again 2 health, draw a card. It's one of the ones you get actually in the priest starter deck. So until you get a few more cards under your belt, until you have that dust that you can use to craft a few more specific things, please bear in mind that you're looking at a very early mid priest deck here. It's not got the full range of cards in. This is something that is probably very constructable early on. If you like it after seeing this, you want to give it a go. It's only got maybe 2 sort of epic and sort of legendary it's only got a couple of rarer cards in. A lot of this you can have straight off, and indeed you can make some really good priest decks by just using the basic cards. The actual starting beginner priest deck is very solid actually, and playing through against the computer or in a few unranked play mode games with the priest, you can very quickly earn at sort of the various levels as you go level up to 20 a lot of useful cards as well. So playing through priest to 20 you can have a pretty competitive deck, and indeed if you Google around a bit you'll find a lot of competitive or useful priest decks that actually don't have any epic or legendary cards in, so they're by no means compulsory to make your deck, is what I'm saying. So Power Word Shield, pretty solid. Gold Tri-Footman, I've got him in there as an early sort of taunt card. I like taunt cards in a priestess to keep damage off me while I'm getting myself set up, while I'm trading away. So he came in as an early game sort of more minion option. The Light Warden, whenever a character is healed, gain 2 attack. I'm a priest. You can see I've got a lot of healing options I want to heal in this deck. So Light Warden I can drop and then heal characters, and suddenly I've got a card that's 3/2 where it's 5 attack and 2 damage, and suddenly it's something that my opponent immediately has to focus on for that 1 mana drop. I'm generally going to be dropping that card when I'm going to heal something next go, so it immediately buffs up pretty quickly, gives my opponents some things to worry about. Early game, you know what, I can drop it, heal something, and in a pinch I can use it to trade with as well. Northshire Cleric, we've already discussed. 2 of those go straight in for the ability. Whenever a minion is healed, draw a card, and the various options that gives me. Divine Spirit with Inner Fire we've already discussed, and doubling a minion's health, even if I don't have Inner Fire to go with it in the late game, is a very, very useful option. Ragnaros I drop and I'm worried about him getting killed. Divine Spirit, 16 damage. They're going to have to use up 2 more attacks. Shadow Word Pain, as we discussed in the little intro to Priest run through, mandatory 2 of those in there. The mana cost for the trading options it gives you, the board control really is what this card is. It potentially gives you. Anyone playing a Priest should always be wary of that when they drop a 3 or less attack minion. The Novice Engineer. Some might argue that this card is actually not too necessary in this deck if I have other draw, but a lot of people play Novice Engineer just for dropping it early game. The ability to draw a card, 1 attack and 2 health is not the strongest 2 mana card in terms of just raw minion power, but that Battle Cry, getting that extra card in the early game, getting your deck going is pretty valuable, and anything that gives you draw is always worth considering if it makes sense in your deck. So for that reason it could be dropped to 1. I could play, beg pardon, other